Hey y'all, it's time for the last chapter of Halloween Vibes, the Halloween novella and Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast Paranormal Cozy Mysteries. So let's go. Chapter 11. How did you know it was Robbie? Sage asked. Danny was leading Bailey's assistant away in handcuffs since he had given up and confessed to murdering Joe. Bailey was watching them go, a shocked expression on her face. Reed had joined the scene, his candy station momentarily forgotten. In fact, Emily realized as she glanced around, most of the people in the square were watching the spectacle. Even kids had paused, their treat bags dangling from their hands, to watch the police haul Robbie away. When my guests went out for dinner last night, they ran into Joe, Emily explained. One of my guests mentioned Joe had been with someone else at the time. That person was in a Halloween costume, though. So when they met Robbie today, they didn't realize it had been him. How did you realize it then? Reed asked. Robbie has been the one decorating the costume shop's scarecrow. That meant he was shuttling boxes of decor, including those red satin roses, from the shop to the square. Right past my office building. Sage's eyes widened. I was tapping into his thoughts of murder every time he walked past. Exactly, Emily said. I should have made the connection when he commented to Jacinda this morning about finally getting to the last box. Robbie witnessed the animosity Joe showed to Rebecca, and he decided he had to act before Joe hurt anyone else. Later that night, as he decorated the scarecrow and you were at your office building's Halloween party, he was plotting murder. Reed watched as Danny maneuvered Robbie into the back of a police car parked at the edge of the square. So he's the one who slashed up my Halloween display. At least he's going to jail for it. I'm pretty sure he's going to jail for murder, Sage pointed out. Yeah, murdering my pumpkins. Actually, Emily said, I expect Bailey is the one who did that. I noticed that when she and Robbie came over today to costume my guests, Bailey was ordering Robbie around and not doing much of anything herself. I think that's because she got a little too wild with the pumpkin slashing. It was her blood we found on the pumpkins in the cemetery, Sage said. She turned and looked at Bailey, who was still staring in the direction Robbie had been taken, even though the police car had already left. Hey, Bailey, snap out of it. Sage waved a hand in front of Bailey's face. What? Bailey said, blinking rapidly. Did you wreck my display in the cemetery? Reed asked. Bailey's face fell. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Joe came to my house after his fight with Gloria, and I was just so angry about the whole thing. I took a drive to cool off, but when I passed the cemetery, I decided a walk might be better for me. I had a pair of fabric shears in my purse, and when I saw the pumpkins, Bailey shrugged. I took out all my anger on them. And your arm? Emily asked. That was an accident. Bailey raised her left arm slightly and plucked at her sweater sleeve with the fingers of her right hand. It's a wonder I didn't need stitches. Those shears are sharp. So sharp, I thought the damage had been done with a carving knife, Emily realized. I really am sorry, Bailey continued. I'll pay the city back, or pay a fine, or whatever I need to do to make it right. Reed's face softened. Why don't you help out at the cemetery during the next Living History event? Volunteers sign up to portray a prominent member of Oak Hill's past while standing in front of that person's grave, and we're always in need of assistance with costumes. Bailey gave Reed a small smile. I'd love to help with that. So when Joe sent the smell of roses, who was he talking about? Sage frowned down at the satin roses, which were scattered around the fallen scarecrow. I'm guessing Joe never saw his killer, but Robbie probably had some of those satin roses on him. He might have dropped one while he was, Emily made a stabbing motion. Robbie obviously picked it up after he finished with Joe, or the police would have found it. The red satin we found at the cemetery must have been a scrap. Bailey nodded. I had been making those roses at a coffee shop, so I had some material in my purse. When I took my shears out, a piece of material must have come out as well. And it happened to snag on the fence post, Emily said. Joe probably had no idea Bailey had been making satin roses for the scarecrow. He just knew one had wound up at his murder scene, and the best way he could communicate that was through the smell of roses. Unbelievable, Bailey said. Robbie has always been protective of me, like a brother, and he's had a crush on Jacinda forever. I guess seeing the confrontation between Joe and Rebecca reminded him that Joe always left a trail of unhappy people in his wake, so he decided to do something about it before someone else he cared about got hurt. There wasn't much left to say, so Emily, Sage, and Reed returned to their respective candy stations. Trevor was talking intently with a man Emily didn't know, so she started giving handfuls of candy to the kids going by. She gave extra to the little girl dressed as a ghost. Trevor caught Emily's eye at one point and grinned, and she knew that even though he hadn't been near the scarecrow when Robbie was arrested, he had still taken in the whole scene. Trish sped past a short while later. Emily, I heard the news. Great job on catching the killer. You're going to give me every single detail tomorrow when I drop off your baked goods. As Trish continued on, Trevor sidled up to Emily. Boo, he said. Emily raised an eyebrow at him. Is that supposed to scare me? No, Joe had a cat named Boo. That guy I was talking to is a coworker of mine, and he's a friend of Joe's family. Apparently, Gloria refuses to take the cat because she says it would just be a reminder of the murder. I think I know the perfect place for him. You want me to take the cat, Emily said flatly. Your guests would love staying at a bed and breakfast with a resident cat, Trevor pointed out. Plus, it's a bit of companionship for you when you're there alone. Emily said non-committally. How about this, Trevor said. Foster the cat. If you enjoy having Boo around, great, he's yours. If you don't, then hold on to him until we find him a forever home. Okay, Emily said, nodding. That I can do. But it's not just me who has to be okay with a cat wandering around the house. The ghosts have to approve too. Why am I getting the image of a cat in my mind? Sage called from her table. I'm going to foster Joe's cat, Emily lifted her head and said more loudly. You hear that, Joe? I'll be keeping Boo for a while. I promise to take good care of him. Don't waste your breath, Sage said. He crossed over as soon as you said you'd be fostering Boo. I felt a wave of relief, and then he was gone. At least we know Joe wasn't all bad. He loved his cat, at least. Trevor and Emily continued handing out candy to kids, and when an upturned hand appeared in Emily's field of vision, she automatically started to drop candy into it. Just before she did, she realized it was an adult-sized hand, as she looked up to see Bear grinning at her. Emily took in her guests, who looked like they were having as much fun as all the kids. We heard the news, Rebecca said, as if their joy needed an explanation. We're so relieved it's over. And I'm relieved it wasn't one of you, Emily said honestly. You and Wyatt snuck out last night, and I worried one or both of you was behind the murder. Wyatt laughed uncomfortably. I didn't realize we were on the suspect list. And we had no idea you knew we had left the house, Rebecca's smile faltered. I couldn't sleep after that run-in with Joe. I didn't want to disturb anyone, so I went outside to get some fresh air. And I woke up to find Rebecca gone, Wyatt said. I went looking for her, but she was walking around the cemetery while I searched the yard and vice versa. Eventually, I found her. We had a good, long talk before we came back inside. Wyatt took Rebecca's hand, and she beamed at him. Emily laughed. Somehow, Sage and I missed running into you two. We had our own late-night adventure through the cemetery. No sooner had Emily's guests wandered off, saying they needed to get fresh Halloween-themed cocktails, than the man Trevor had been talking to walked up to the table. He had a cat carrier in one hand, and he lifted it. Here's Boo. A black cat was curled up at the back of the carrier, nearly invisible despite the floodlights that illuminated the square. Mostly, Emily could just see golden eyes gazing at her solemnly. Oh, you're already giving Boo to me? Emily took half a step back. I don't have food, or a litter box, or anything. The man waved dismissively. I packed up all of Boo's belongings earlier today, and I dropped them off on your front porch before I went and got Boo himself. Emily turned to Trevor. You told him I'd take the cat, even before I knew there was a cat. Trevor's smile was lopsided as he answered, I knew you'd say yes. It's getting late enough that there aren't many trick-or-treaters left. Why don't you take Boo to his new home, and I'll wrap up things here." Emily said goodnight to her friends, then did just as Trevor had suggested. Boo was quiet on the entire ride home, and Emily wondered how aware the cat was that his owner had died. She'd had a cat when she was a kid, but that had been years ago. Having Boo around Eternal Rest would take some getting used to. Emily parked under the carport behind Eternal Rest and took Boo in through the back door. She set the carrier down in the parlor and opened the wire mesh door on the front of it, but Boo didn't budge. "Come on, Boo, it's safe. You can come out." The cat didn't respond. "Okay, then I'll go get your things off the porch. Maybe some food will coax you out." Emily raised her voice slightly. "Mrs. Thompson? Kelly? You two here?" Knock. "This is Boo. He's going to be living with us, at least for a while. Is that okay?" One enthusiastic knock confirmed the ghosts were happy to welcome Boo to the family. Emily walked onto her front porch and realized she had forgotten to turn on the decorative lights. She flicked them on so her guests could enjoy the ambiance when they got home later that night. Boo's things were sitting to one side of the front door, and Emily quickly moved them into the hallway. Then, on a whim, she went back out the door and walked a short distance into the yard, then turned to survey her front porch. Boo appeared in the open doorway, and for a moment, Emily worried he was going to make a run for it. She would, she knew, have to change her habits now that a cat was living at Eternal Rest. Remembering to close the front door behind her would be one of those changes. Instead of running, though, Boo perched on the threshold, making the Halloween scene on the porch even more picturesque. It was only then Emily noticed one of her guests' jack-o'-lanterns was lit. The tea candle inside burned brightly, illuminating the silly grin Rebecca had carved into her pumpkin. Emily doubted Trevor's coworker had done it when he dropped off Boo's belongings, and if her guests had lit the candles before going to the square, they would have burned out much earlier in the evening. Emily looked around, turning a full circle before facing the porch again. "Hello?" The only answer was the sound of the fall leaves rustling in the night breeze. Emily walked closer to the lit pumpkin, and Boo meowed at her loudly. "I don't know who lit it either, Boo," she told him. Emily lifted the top off the jack-o'-lantern, leaned down, and blew out the candle. As the smoke curled up into the night air, she whispered, "Happy Halloween." The end. Thank you so much for coming along on this journey through Halloween vibes and another adventure with Emily and her friends and ghosts at Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, maybe we'll do this again next Halloween. Thank you so much.